Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We will be getting started in just a couple of minutes. We're going to wait for a few more minutes to see who else joins. In the meantime, please introduce yourself in the chat and tell us your name and where you are from, and we will get started shortly. All right, hello again, everyone. We are about to get started in a couple minutes, waiting for folks to come in. But in the meantime, if you haven't already, please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your name and where you're from, and we'll get started shortly. Well, I think we should get started. Thank you all for introducing yourselves in the chat. Susan's right. It's a great group of people from across the country, and so we're really thrilled to have you all here. Yes, so let's get started. Becoming an EdTech Privacy Ninja. We are thrilled to be here and to have you with us to discuss this very important topic. Privacy, interoperability, and your EdTech data school system technology. Our group of speakers and participants come from a variety of different organizations. We're very grateful to Common Sense, Future Privacy Forum, COSIN, Raytown Quality Schools, and of course, Project Unicorn for working together and putting this event out in front of you today. I'm Jonathan Berry Wolf. I am a project associate with Project Unicorn. And basically, our goal is to advance, advocate for, and implement data interoperability in K-12 education technology. And so we are very excited to be sponsoring this event and to talk about interoperability, privacy, and why it's so important. Our speakers today include Gerard Kelly from Common Sense, Jim Siegel from Future of Privacy Forum, Melissa Tebenkamp from Raytown School District, also representing COSIN here today, and Susan Bearden from Innovate EDU and Project Unicorn. And today we will be discussing, starting off by discussing what is privacy, what is interoperability, and how do they relate. We'll be introducing the digital citizenship curriculum. We will be talking with you about getting to know your privacy evaluation tools and what's available to you. We will be discussing a little bit about how to prepare your policies and procedures. And we will finish off with a question and answer session at the end. And, you know, as a part of the marketing materials for this event, we discussed that implementing and understanding privacy takes ninja-like skills. And while that was definitely a fun bit of a pun on the whole ninja concept, it's true. Privacy and interoperability and getting these things to work together is challenging. And so we're here to discuss those with you, to provide resources, and to come along as you grow through the chapters of your EdTech Privacy Ninja journey. So without further ado, we're going to start things off with Chapter 1. What is privacy, interoperability, and how do they relate? And I'll pass it over to Susan.
Hello, everyone. It's great to have you here, and I am very excited to be this panel of EdTech expert rock stars that you are going to hear about so many fabulous resources today that are available to help you on your privacy journey. I'm really excited for today's presentation. So just to kick it off, I just want to clarify, you know, what is privacy? You know, what are we talking about today? Because privacy is a huge topic. And in this context, we're discussing the use, collection, handling, and governance of student and staff personally identifiable information, or PII. That includes information that could be used to identify or locate or contact an individual student. And that includes things like name, address, student ID, login information. It also includes students' academic, health, and disciplinary records, but it also includes information that can be combined to identify a particular student, like, for instance, student demographics or their birth date. And what is interoperability? Interoperability is the seamless, secure, and controlled change of data between applications. So you benefit from interoperability every day without knowing it. For instance, a good example of a product that works with interoperable standards would be anything using Bluetooth. So that's why, for instance, I have my Apple AirPods that I'm using right now. I can use them with either my Mac products or with my Windows PC. And that's because a group of organization got together, a group of folks got together to agree upon standards for Bluetooth, and folks in the industry agreed to use those standards for Bluetooth. So that means regardless of manufacturer, my AirPods can communicate with other Bluetooth devices. So the way that works in education is that interoperable data standards define how data is collected and stored. So I'm sure that many of you educators have had the experience of having to log into multiple platforms to check student progress in order to get an overall view of how that student is doing in your class. You might use, even if you're teaching one subject, you might use a couple of different platforms, and then you might have to take that information and you might have to manually enter it into a grade book, or you might have no way of figuring out how you can add formative assessments directly into a grade book. Interoperability makes it possible for all that information to be shared and stored in a single location so that teachers can access all of that information by just going to one place. True interoperability is standards-based, it is vendor agnostic, and it is practitioner-driven. So it's designed to meet the needs of education practitioners. So you may be saying, so how do privacy and interoperability relate? Well, first, a solid privacy and data governance program is a critical foundation for interoperable systems. In fact, it is a prerequisite for interoperable systems because interoperability can help support improved student privacy, or it can make student data more vulnerable because there's so many factors about how data is stored, how it's collected, what is collected, who has access, when they have access, what's the training environment place. There's all sorts of factors involved in creating a great, strong governance program. The Trusted Learning Environment Seal from COSIN, which Melissa is going to talk about today, includes leadership practices, business practices, data security practices, professional development practices, and classroom practices as the necessary components for developing a comprehensive privacy program. And our panelists today have tons of resources for you. And becoming an EdTech Privacy Ninja will prepare your school system to reap the benefits of interoperability and to help keep student and employee data more safe and secure. So without further ado, we are going to go on to one of my favorite people, Melissa Tebenkamp from Raytown Quality Schools, who's going to share with you the journey that they went on in Raytown to develop a strong privacy protection program. Melissa?
Okay, so I just had this weird issue where I lost my audio again. So I'm going to try to I'm hoping that you can hear me. Can you nod? Perfect. Okay, I switched that output again. So we should be okay if you can hear me. And thank you, thank you, thank you. And I loved that transition because I remember having conversations years ago when we were talking about interoperability, and then there was an absence of the conversation of data privacy. And really that's kind of putting the cart before the horse, because if you're not securing your data, when you dive into the realm of interoperability, you actually could create additional risks for your data. So I love this conversation. I'm so excited to talk to you about our journey. And for those of you who, I see a lot of familiar faces in the chat, and that is great. And for those, or I should say familiar names, and for those who I haven't seen in a while, I hope we all get together and have these conversations again at some point. And those who are new, welcome. And I'm Melissa Tebenkamp from the Raytown School District. I have been in this immersed in data privacy for years and years and years. And I love this conversation and never gets old. So Raytown Schools is a smaller school district, I guess medium sized, just right outside of Kansas City, Missouri. And we actually serve some of the urban core and some of the suburban areas. So this picture here, and I love it. I really wish this was the actual picture for my data center when I came onto the district, but that got lost in the move. But it really did look like this. So back in 2006, our data center was a couple walls of wires. I think there was equipment behind the wires, but you couldn't see it. And there was no security. And when I mean no security, any student could navigate on the file server to my superintendent's storage and see his files. And that was really, really scary. So here I come in, super, super young. I swear I looked like I was 13 at the time. And this is, you know, the geeky little girl that comes into technology and says, we need to start changing things. Like, we cannot continue to operate this way. And we really started focusing on physical security, because the data governance piece and data privacy really has to stackle up. And if my physical network isn't secure and I don't have everything in place logically, then there's no way I'm going to be able to do that on the contract side or on the instructional app side. So we really spent the next 3 to 4 years digging into all of our physical security, cybersecurity, and getting our ducks in a row and making sure that our network was set up properly, our servers and permissions, and you know, we segmented our network, so lots and lots of different activities to get the physical network and the servers just secured from what would have been at that time, or what was at that time, an obvious data privacy issue. So I say that, and I say 3 to 4 years, because many, many people think, I'm going to start this year, and by the time I get done, I'm going to be able to apply for the trusted learning environment, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. But it doesn't really happen that way. I usually show a picture of a turtle, but since we're in the ninja theme, we're going to have a ninja turtle, and the M is from Melissa this time. But we have to go slow to go fast and be very strategic. And you have to think like a ninja and attack it from all angles and be incredibly flexible and versatile and open to what's going on all around you. And so we went slow. We got our physical network and you know, at a secure point, and made sure my servers were there. And then we started focusing on resources. And with that, along those same lines, similar to timeframes, so now I'm starting to focus on contracts and resources and what we're doing with our data, who has access to that data. And there's this little organization, not so little, And a gentleman by the name of Keith Kroger, who comes to me and I meet him and he says, you really should get involved with us. And at that point, I got involved with COSIN and started working with COSIN on some working groups, getting kind of, into the weeds of data privacy and into the weeds of the initiative. And in 2015, COSIN pulled a group of 28 school districts together. We had 4 national organizations, you'll see those up there, sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. And we spent over 6 months diving into, when we get this right, not that we have it right, but when we get this right with data privacy, what does it look like? And that journey with a great group of colleagues really started to change our trajectory of what we were doing and really open our eyes to ways and what we needed to be doing with our data and some other pieces that we need to have in place. And so with that, these school systems came together and we developed what is called a trusted learning environment and the 25 practices that are based around that. So we're going to move forward because I don't have a lot of time and I can spend hours talking just about this piece of it. So we move forward, and after these 25 practices come together and COSIN's ready for that initial group, then I think, man, I'm part of it. I think we're ready. We're going to apply. And so we did, and we were, Raytown was one of the first 7 among that cohort of the first 7 districts in the nation to get the Trusted Learning Environment seal, which was absolutely amazing. That process, though, was a journey for us. So we had this application, we had these 25 practices, and it allowed me to see, one, where some gaps were, and I was involved in this process, so we're starting to build it as we go. But also what I realized was we had all of these components, but we did not have anything like it was all informal or pieces here and there. It wasn't anything formalized into a complete document. And so when I get done, I realized I failed to share this resource on the resource list. So I will put it in chat when I get done speaking, but I created our data governance manual. And that's 42 pages of pulling together links to all of our policies, so probably another 30 pages of policy, but all of our policies, procedures, all of our practices in one area so that anybody could look and see what our data governance program looks like, what our environment and culture is. And actually that's mandatory reading for all of my new hires. And so I'll post that for you because that was a great process in the journey, just pulling it all together so we could see the big picture. And that helped us identify some of our gaps and helped us continue to grow a program in that way as well. So with that, some of the ways that we take this, and I do have it listed here, but I did not give the link to the resource, is we do have our data governance manual, which we train every year on critical parts of that with all of our staff in the district. And I can't stress it enough. We have online resources for our staff. We do face-to-face training. I do training videos. I will put some links to some of those training videos as well in chat for you. We use humor as much as we can. And training for us is not once a year. It's not you watch the training video at the beginning of the year and you never hear from us again until next year when we talk about FERPA and data governance. But instead, you're getting emails from us throughout the entire year. We were, right before the COVID shutdown, we were doing weekly emails. We didn't bombard our staff as much over the shutdown, and we will get back to those weekly emails of videos, of memes, something I love to call potty PD, which are posters in the bathroom stalls, because I've got a captive audience. I'm going to let you look at something that I want you to learn. I will tell you, we train a lot, and we have a handbook that every one of our staff has access to. And I was in a meeting, and at first I was a little offended because somebody asked my staff, how much training do you guys get on FERPA and data governance? And somebody said, we don't ever get any training. And I laughed, and I was kind of mortified because we train. But I realized that it's actually part of a culture now, and they don't see it as training, but it's just information I'm coming, and they can speak to it. They know the language. They know what they're supposed to do. I have proof that they're doing it. And to me, what I took was a failure actually is a great success because they're not realizing that I'm training them now. It's just part of our daily conversation, which has been pretty awesome. So with that, my other hat that I wear is part of COSIN. I sit on the national board and co-chair the Protecting Privacy, Protecting Privacy Working Group. And we have lots of great resources that we put out there. So the Trusted Learning Environment Seal is part of that. But if you go to cosin.org, under our focus areas is protecting privacy. And there are so many great resources there. There's a toolkit there. It's building your data governance from the ground up, and that's pages and lists of policies that you need to have, or that you should have, and crosswalk those policies and give you some examples. And we always like to relate those back to examples. Best practices or exemplar resources that you can use to reference that. There is a great slide deck there to make your case to leadership of why privacy is so important to you, and some training. COSIN does have online training modules. I actually teach a class, and then there's a self-study course as well on data privacy. So lots and lots of pieces there. And then the joint effort between COSIN and the Data Quality Campaign on the student data principles that many of you may have already be familiar with there. So beyond that is the Trusted Learning Environment Seal. And I will tell you, we have districts apply and not get the seal, and that's okay, because what we do with those districts who are applying and not getting the seal is we're giving them feedback, and then we offer coaching to help get you there, because the goal isn't to be an exclusive club. It really is a short list right now, but it is to share that message and to get everybody to that point to where we can have a large number of trusted learning environment districts nationwide. And with that comes a lot of power in changing then the products that are coming at us and how we're addressing data privacy as a country. And so it's a movement that we're starting here. And I like to say it's kind of like that good housekeeping seal of approval, that we're doing what's right with our student data. And we take a ton of pride in it. So with the Trusted Learning Environment, if you go to trustedlearning.org, there are the 25 practices there and tons and tons of resources. I put a few on the side there for you, but tons and tons of resources to just help get you going in that direction and moving towards having a strong data governance program. In addition, there's this transparency and trust, and building a trusted learning environment with your parents and talking to parents, and also additional resources from COSIN. There are member-only resources as well, just to let you guys know that. So many of the trusted learning environment, or many of the data privacy initiatives under COSIN, are sponsored by some amazing partners, and through that sponsorship we're able to offer that at no charge to anybody, but some resources are developed in-house and are for members only there. And then there's that Protecting Student and Privacy course that I had spoken about. That is a self-study course. So lots and lots going on at COSIN, and I am so grateful to be a part of this movement, because it really is super, super valuable and important. And I always say we need to put as much effort into protecting the digital safety of our kids as we do the physical safety. And we have some great organizations talking today about how, as as a nation, we're working to do that. So at that, I believe I am passing it off to Common Sense Media, which is another amazing partner in the city.
Thank you, Melissa. Those were amazing resources. I really appreciate the presentation. Can you hear me okay? I'm getting a thumbs up. All right, let me get the mic. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I'm Gerard Kelly of Common Sense Media. I'm the director of the privacy program. And today we're gonna go through some of the resources that Common Sense provides around privacy, and dive a little bit into our privacy ratings and how they work and how they relate, as Susan pointed out at the beginning of the presentation, to interoperability. We've been thinking about this for a while, how interoperability and privacy work. As Susan pointed out, interoperability really defines better privacy and security practices through different standards. And it's not just about how data is collected and stored, but also how it's used by the company who's collecting it and potentially third parties. When we think about the relationship between interoperability and privacy, a big point that comes up a lot is its purpose, right? That especially in the education context, we're collecting the data, we're sharing the data for the educational purpose of the student, and so making sure there's different limitations on use, limiting how third parties could use that data for their own purposes, I think helps everyone understand how the rules of the road work when it comes to interoperability and sharing data between different partners and having different standards. And it's really easy to get technical really quickly and talk about APIs and how data flows. But I also want to kind of take it back and think about the bigger purpose here, that really interoperability and privacy should lead to better learning outcomes for students. Really, that how data is collected, how it's used, how it's stored, this is all about minimizing the potential risks and harms, right? Depending on what data is collected, and how it's used. And this we can see it disproportionately impacts folks with lower resources to purchase maybe the more expensive subscription services that have better privacy practices versus maybe some of the free resources, right, which are maybe more advertising supporting. And so there's this overarching goal, right, of how do we achieve interoperability? How do we minimize these achievement gaps? How do we improve outcome for all kids? We've been spending a lot of time thinking about it, and this slide is really to help you think about some of these big ideas. And when we started the privacy program about 5-6 years ago, we were thinking about standards. How do we create a standard for privacy that balances the interests of the company, the vendors who are producing the products, the expectations of parents, of educators, of students who are using these products. And so we have a couple different resources we'll talk today about how we provide information for different folks that to help them make better informed decisions about privacy. The first resource we'll talk about today is our big digital citizenship curriculum, if folks are not aware. Our privacy program helped a little bit in the privacy and security section of the resources. But really, I mean, this is to help students and educators and folks engage with the tools they use, not just in the classroom, but also at home and in life, to become a better digital citizen, right? To be aware of some of the privacy risks and harms that they could come across, right? Using these tools and sharing data and interacting with other students. And so this is a great resource, which is just updated as well. This comes out with an update every couple of years. And I'll go to the next slide here. Kind of give you some of the high level overview, but definitely would love for you to click on the link and take a look at all the new features. There's 73 new lessons, new different grade and age bands to really help educators and students focus in on the content that that's right for their learning level. A lot of new videos as students interact more with the video content from quality sources like KUD Education and Teen Voices, really talking about what privacy and really digital curriculum as a whole means to them. All the lessons are research based, and we collaborated with a lot of folks on the new digit curriculum. So Project Zero at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, if folks are aware, we're involved with a lot of the lessons to really make sure that there was a high learning outcome. And they're really, if folks are not aware of the digital citizenship curriculum, they're broken down into different categories. So media well balanced, privacy and security, which I love for folks on the call today to check out. Digital footprint and identity. A lot of folks don't realize the footprint they leave behind in a world of interoperability where your data collected on one app can follow you across multiple apps. And really the relationships with folks online, cyberbullying, hate speech, there's a lot there. So I'd love for folks to check out those resources. And when it comes to students, right, becoming a better digital citizenship, how they use technology, how their data is collected and used can help them become better users of these technologies. There's also more activities and for folks who maybe haven't used Digit in a while, more printouts, more different interactive content. It does integrate with Google for Education, so there's your Google Slides and docs and forms that students can fill out and you can send home as well. But I love the fact that if you're not a non-Google user, you can print these out, and hand them out in class. And hopefully we're all back in person or hybrid models later this year. There's new lesson types. There's new activities. We worked with organization with Cornell's social media lab, and they created a program called Test Drive, which really lets young folks kind of figure out what social media is, how it works, some of the risks and of sharing your data. That once it's out there in the wild, it can be shared without their permission. So a lot of different tools for folks to kind of simulate some of the risks that they can see around privacy, how their data can work in different contexts. And really, as I mentioned, all of our our work here is to really develop skills, right, of students and through collaborative sessions with educators to become better digital citizens. So I wanted to put that resource out there. If folks are not aware, we did a huge upgrade just last year. So love you to check out kind of the new features. In addition to to digital citizenship, as probably a lot of folks on the call are aware, at the beginning of the pandemic, over a year ago, there were spreadsheets being emailed around, meta spreadsheets of other spreadsheets of all the different learning resources that parents could use at home, educators were using in the classroom, different video tutorials, different content. And so we created a great portal called wideopenschool.org, where really we take the best kind of curated content, again matching the digital citizenship age bands, right? So it's age appropriate, for their different learning abilities, and to really kind of the best of the best. And we also integrate our privacy ratings in there as well. So whether it's a parent, it's an educator, it's a student, they have all the information in one place to make an informed decision about a product, its data collection, in regards to privacy or other metrics that we'll get into in a minute. So love for folks to check out that resource if you haven't already. Now we'll dive a little bit into our ratings if folks on the call are not aware. Common Sense, we rate the privacy policies of popular EdTech products. We love reading privacy policies. That's what we do. We've worked with many folks here with Project Unicorn and Jim Siegel here on the call as well over the last couple of years around our ratings, making sure that they we're simple to understand, simple to use, easily translatable into other contexts and translations into other languages as well in the future. And really, there's three big ratings we give products. The highest rating is our Blue Pass. That really meets our minimum requirements. And think of this in the educational context, right? This is a pass. It's not 100%, but it meets some of those thresholds when it talks about standards, right? That it's not just maybe the legal standards of privacy or your governance policies, but it's also expectations of kind of best practices that we see in the industry, expectations of parents, educators, and students who tell us, some of those creepy factors that a product would receive an orange warning for around selling data, targeted ads, for example, profiling, to sell for data brokers, unrelated third-party marketing communications. These are all these kind of creepy factors that folks tell us that they would love to make a decision about a product based on those factors. But reading a 15, 20-page privacy policy, another 15, 20-page terms of service, maybe an additional cookie policy, an additional student data privacy agreement, that is a lot of work, and that's what we do at Common Sense. We try to take out the guesswork and really highlight some of the key factors that we know folks make a decision on when it comes to privacy. We also have an overall score. A lot of products maybe end up maybe in the warning rating, and so our score is based on 10 different categories, kind of subcategories of data collection, sharing, security, safety, compliance, and so that score really is across a spectrum of different issues. How that product can be compared to other products. And sadly, we do have a fail. We have a red. This is when a product doesn't even have a privacy policy. So you're not even able to start that discussion with the vendor about interoperability and maybe one of the more technical discussions, because there's no expectation of what those privacy practices are, of how they're going to use data. And some folks fall into that category as well. And so we'll dig a little bit deeper into those ratings here. About 20%, so really kind of the A's and the B's, in the education world, get that Blue Pass rating. These are folks, who've thought about privacy, they've thought about interoperability, they've thought about standards and expectations, They're really, they're really focused on making a privacy protecting product that isn't, trying to maybe exploit or use the data, of their students, to make money. In that warning category, it's a bit of a mix. A lot of companies have, great practices, but sometimes some worse practices in there. If a company doesn't talk about any of those creepy factors, as I mentioned before, around selling data, targeted ads, profiling, all these things you would expect, folks who sign the pledge or other badges like that would earn. That's when they get that warning rating. We also integrate our ratings into our Common Sense education platform. A lot of educators and feedback we received is, can we have all of the information in one place, right, to help make a quick decision? So this is an example of No Red Ink. It's a popular product with students. So you see that rating there integrated right next to the pedagogical rating, where our education team actually uses the app and talks about the different features and its use in education. We just look at the policy, so we're not using the product. We're just looking at what those promises are, and that's how it's integrated into our education platform. We're also planning later this year to integrate our ratings into our consumer platform as well. So parents and kids looking for apps or products to use that may not necessarily be in the classroom, but sometimes there's overlap. I mean, the big example is Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is used in schools across the country for some reason, and different curriculum activities. But of course, it's also very popular with kids. So there is a lot of crossover between products that are used in the classroom and at home. As I mentioned before, our ratings are really a form of a standard, right? They look at both the legal and technical requirements, that are found in privacy policies, but also expectations of parents, of educators, of vendors, to really come up with these different ratings and scores. As I mentioned before, about 2,800 products now, about 3,000 products on our education platform have that, will have that rating integrated. And this is a way for folks to click on that rating. If they do, it jumps down to the bottom of the page. A big concern around interoperability and privacy is providing the right amount of information to folks at the right decision point. And so we have a high level rating and score, but then we're able to break that down into different subcategories, as I mentioned before, around collection, sharing, security, safety, compliance. So folks can make a decision about what matters most to them. When you click a little deeper, we have kind of like peeling back the onion. A lot of folks just need the rating. They just need the pass, warning, or fail to make a decision. Some folks like that score as well when they're comparing products side by side to see how they compare across a wide range of issues. But if you want to go really deep, which we really encourage, we love folks to learn more. We have a what's called a full evaluation. If you click through, we have an overall summary right there. You can see this is an example for code.org. Those overall summaries are curated by our expert team of privacy experts who do these evaluations. So it's about a paragraph, so 4 or 5 sentences, which is close to poetry if you're trying to condense 50 pages of legalese of different policies for a product down into just those couple of sentences that we know that parents, educators, vendors, folks who are making decisions about a product, want to know. And if you scroll down below the fold, you'll see different labels where we break down the strengths and weaknesses. As I mentioned, some folks really care about safety. Some folks really care about maybe parental consent, parental controls. And so we want to, meet folks where they're at in terms of awareness around privacy, and let them make a decision, based on their needs and based on how the product's used. And I think that is the last slide. But yeah, we'd love for folks to check out all our great resources. We've been thinking about interoperability and privacy for a long time, and we think our ratings are, the best, step in that direction. But we love your feedback on how to improve and how to make these even better, for you and for educators and for parents on the call. So from there, I'll turn it over.
Hello, I'm Jim Siegel. I'm a senior technologist for Future of Privacy Forum. And as I was preparing for this session, I was giving some thoughts at kind of ninjas and privacy, and I ended up stumbling on the original origins of the word and its 2 characters, and it's the characters for person and persevere. And I don't think anything more closely describes the experience of working in EdTech and in schools in the last year than a person who perseveres and builds skills. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the resources from Future of Privacy Forum, and just give a little bit of context to kind of how I see how privacy relates to interoperability. And before joining Future of Privacy Forum, I spent many years in Fairfax County, and a lot of my role was evaluating and vetting educational technology. And vetting educational technology, looking at the technical parts of vetting, involves all of these things jumbled around interoperability and security and privacy, and thinking about accessibility and equity and training. And all of those things kind of disparate. So in kind of thinking and bringing all of these things together, when I'm looking to see if, as with common sense, does something pass? Does it pass your vetting? And I look at this and line them up, and I look at this, for me, this acronym of how all of these things line together of interoperability and training and privacy. And so I use this mnemonic to communicate how to think about vetting EdTech and the relationship between this. That was an easy tool for communicating how, on the technical side, interoperability relates to privacy and where privacy fits in when schools are adopting and vetting technology. And common conventions and mnemonics like this are another tool and a standard of aligning people's way of thinking. So there are a number of resources that we have at Future of Privacy Forum. We have a number of sites. Our main site, fpf.org, but Student Privacy Compass is where we put our resources. This is our repository of our resources, as well as we're also a meta search engine for all of the great resources that many of our partners have. But at Student Privacy Compass, we have resources that are categorized by student resources and parent resources for schools and states and policymakers, and a number of other folks that are searchable by what your role is. A couple resources that I really want to dive in on, because I think they're tremendously useful, especially right now. A resource that we released at the end of last year is our Student Privacy Communications Toolkit. We released this both in English and Spanish, and there are a lot of really great uses for this. It walks through how to create a culture of privacy, and in each of these sections, we dig into what that topic is and what it means for each of the audiences that we talk about. And we provide links to a number of excellent resources, some of them from other folks that are on this call, some of them from folks that I can see in the chat, folks at PTAC. Also, tools for how to talk to parents, examples of useful templates and tools, back to school letters, consent forms, and a number of other useful resources, messaging and letters for parents. In addition, last year, at the beginning of the pandemic, we started releasing a number of essential training resources targeted to teachers, a set of short, easily digestible, usually 5 to 15 minutes long, short videos covering basic privacy 101 topics, a number of special topics that have become really of particular interest during the pandemic, like monitoring students, and some particular topics related to the pandemic in terms of things like mandating video in the classroom. Another resource that we've used in the last year and a half has been, we've run a 10-month-long Train the Trainer program, and we're in our second year for K-12, and that runs from February to November, and we'll be kicking off and opening that up again starting at the end of November of this year. Each month we run regular privacy leader webinars. These are for for school district leaders, and they have a number of topics that are useful for school folks, including sharing data with military recruiters, video classrooms and video mandates, and health data. And at the end of this month, we have a session on sharing data with community organizations, which is particularly useful as schools are looking at filling in that learning loss and how community organizations can be partners in helping with that. And the information for signing up for the listserv to get notifications on the upcoming webinars is at the bottom there. Gerard mentioned other forms of certification or assurance on privacy commitments. One of them is FPF's Student Privacy Pledge, and this is a series of voluntary commitments from vendors that commit to do or not do certain practices, like not collecting or selling or sharing student information. If you go to this site, studentprivacypledge.org, you see a list of all of the vendors that have signed the pledge. And lastly, on our main site, fpf.org, which covers more information than just youth and education, we cover a wide range of privacy areas, but there are several resources that are useful for communicating about privacy topics that can be useful for folks in education. We have a great collection of really beautiful and highly explanatory infographics for explaining and communicating things like artificial intelligence and location sharing and data de-identification. So those are great tools as you're communicating some of the more complex technical topics about data collection and privacy. And one that I wanted to highlight that might be of particular interest to folks in education is we just released a report on privacy and extended reality, artificial reality, augmented reality, that was done with Future of Privacy Forum and Common Sense Media, and that's on our main fpf.org site. And now I'll turn it back over to Susan.
Thank you so much. All of our speakers, there has been so much incredible information that has been shared. I know we've had a couple of questions that have been popped into the chat, and we'd be happy to answer more questions. Just go ahead and add them to the chat and we can address those to our speakers. I do have a couple of questions that I'd like to pose. And I guess it's going to be primarily directed at Melissa and Jim, but feel free, Gerard, to chime in if you would like. There's so many aspects to developing a comprehensive student data privacy program. It can often feel overwhelming for district leaders. How do you recommend people start?
Under the resources from COSIN and under the trusted learning environment, there's a self-assessment, and that self-assessment will help you identify kind of where your big gaps are. And then I always suggest that folks start with the low-hanging fruit to gain some momentum. So take care of the big things. Sometimes you'll hear, hey, you can take 5 things and that'll take care of 80% of it. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I always say, try to start with your easiest battles, the low-hanging fruit that you can change. You can get some momentum. If you try to bite off too much at the beginning or try to tackle something really big or something that you know will have some resistance, then sometimes you stall. So gain some momentum before you start trying to do the hard stuff.
On to that, I think they're just leveraging a lot of great examples. I'll plug a COSIN resource, which is Privacy from the Ground Up, that looks at kind of a number of the really essential policies and provides examples from other districts. The other thing is just not to get overwhelmed. There's so much in law and security and data governance in this. it's important to have a few people in the district that are experts, but it's also really important that in addition to being an expert in the privacy, being able to parse out what each person, each stakeholder, each audience, whether it's central office or teacher or parent, what do they need to know about a given part of privacy? Not everybody needs to be an expert in the law or an expert in applications vetting. So focusing that communication so that you're not overwhelming people.
Terrific, Jim. Thank you. Gerard, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
The vendors, as Jim and Melissa mentioned, is part of that process, and using our resources hopefully as that first starting point, seeing maybe what the areas of opportunity, maybe some areas that you would like a vendor to have better practices, might be that kicking off point to having a discussion with the company about their student data privacy practices, putting in place an additional student data privacy agreement, maybe between the school or district or company, to better protect students, to increase the trust, right, that you have in creating this policy.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have a question in the chat. Want to know how data is not accessible across interoperable apps and who decides when to share data with the other apps. I teach students to advocate for themselves and promote student ownership and digital citizenship. So can students control which apps see their data? That's a great question. I would say it depends on the context. Jim, do you have anything you want to add, since you recently, I know that this is something that you've dealt with and when you were in Fairfax?
Yes, thank you. So in Susan's introduction, she talked about kind of standards-based interoperability, and I like to think about this in a couple different ways. So there's a big difference from a privacy implication standpoint in terms of interoperability, like district-controlled interoperability. That might be authentication interoperability, like SAML, or centrally controlled data sharing, like the LTI standard, or some other form of data sharing. And then there's interoperability with like a lowercase I, and that's a lot of what teachers and students would experience. So a good example of that is everything that you do when you hit login with Google. And that's interoperability that's initiated by the user, not the district. And that's really where understanding the difference between two kinds of interoperability and who has agency and who has control, and leveraging digital citizenship. So central interoperability can be controlled kind of by the district. Data sharing, self-disclosed data sharing, it's important to control that through training, through digital citizenship.
Absolutely. Melissa or Gerard, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
And we have these discussions a lot about ownership and controlling data, and that student ownership versus instructional, entities needing to be able to conduct business. And so I think it goes down to what Jim said, is there is some agency of control, but many of the resources, at least in our district, we're only going to use a resource and ask a student to log into a resource and share data with a resource that we know is safe, that we vetted the contract, that we actually have a contract in place with them, and we are using interoperability to manage that data and control that data. And so, your students would not necessarily get the choice of whether or not they can log into your science textbook, but some of those additional resources, it may be depending on how your district is structured. So I think that those questions are great questions to ask in the individual cultures within your district, because each district is structured a little bit different.
Great questions to ask the vendor, to ask, when you're vetting these companies, and to see their privacy policies, You may not be able to change what data is collected, but you could sure, make sure that it's used in the proper ways.
Absolutely. And it's also worth noting that not all interoperable systems, we're not always talking about two-way interoperability. So many times it may be that information from one system might be flowing from like a learning management system into an operational data store, and then that information is pulled into another system. So it's not necessarily that all data is there's not always bi-directional communication between applications. It really depends on the very specific context. And that brings, Jim, you just brought up the great question about all this starts with knowing what tools you use in your district, because one question I wanted to ask is, how do you deal with the tension that happens between teachers who want to use the latest app or in their classroom and privacy concerns, and the fact that on the one hand, you don't want teachers to be using apps that haven't been vetted for privacy, but on the other hand, you don't want to create bureaucratic processes where teachers might have to wait for a year and a half in order to find out if their app has been validated. Do you have any recommendations on how to handle that challenge?
We have a process that is a request process. So we have an automated, approval process that goes through that allows us to gather data up front. I have a nice flowchart for our teachers. I believe in empowering their teachers. There are big questions that if a vendor fails those questions, they're not going to get approved. So my teachers can weed those out. For instance, if the site says not to be used by students under the age of 18 or people under the age of 18, we're not using it. That's an automatic red flag. That doesn't happen. So we have the big screening questions, and then we have that process go through. It's not a year and a half. Sometimes it's a couple weeks. Sometimes it's several months, depending on the vendor and how well they work through that process with us. But one of my big keys is I stopped saying no and instead started asking, what are you trying to accomplish? What problem are you trying to solve with this? Because if that resource doesn't work, I can find them another resource that helps solve their problem. And really, if we start focusing it that way, instead of I'm just trying to get the latest and greatest tool, I'm not collecting widgets, I'm solving problems. And then we're going to find the right resource for them. And we found out that most of the time, we already have that resource to solve that problem. They just didn't realize that resource had that feature.
To unmute myself. Okay, great. We had one last question, and I guess this is a question for Jim. Will the video of the FPF forum that overlaps time-wise with this webinar be available so we can watch it as well as the webinar? Jim, do you know the answer to that question?
Done so many webinars, I'm not sure which one that is.
I would imagine if you had previously registered for the webinar, if there was recorded, I would imagine that they would send you a link. But you might actually reach out to check the webpage where the video was listed, where you can to see if they have any information about that. Oh, wait, Robin, was the release of the FPF extended report on extended reality? Oh, is that what the video is about?
More of those webinars this week. I don't know if that specific one was recorded. I know the one that was on Friday, that was the kickoff on LinkedIn, it has been recorded. I think many of them are.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, we are at time right now. So just before we go, would love to encourage folks on the call to consider signing the Project Unicorn Pledge. You see the URL on the slide above. So the Unicorn Pledge is, we have one for districts and one for vendors. And basically, we are asking you to pledge to work towards utilizing interoperable systems. And you can find the pledge on the link above, and we will, once you sign the pledge, you'll also have access to a lot of additional Project Unicorn resources. Jonathan, is there anything you want to add?
In a resource for you all to check out. We have a lot of great webinars and resources and programs available to you, and we hope you will take advantage of the services and our collaboration.
Absolutely. We have tons of resources on the Project Unicorn website. If you just go to projectunicorn.org/resources, and we have a searchable database with lots of resources, whether you are a vendor, a educator, a technology leader, we have resources designed to help you on your interoperability journey. And also, please consider taking the school system data survey. This is a new survey that we just released. We are collecting data from the field about where districts stand on their interoperability journey. And whether you are advanced on your interoperability journey or whether you haven't even started, we want to hear from you, and we want you to make your voice heard. And the responses to the survey will help us. We're going to be producing a report of anonymized responses that will be coming out in the fall, kind of a state of the sector on interoperability, and it will help us be able to develop resources for the field to help folks move towards interoperable systems. So please check out the school system data survey. It's only about 15 to 20 minutes, and we would be really, really, really grateful. So thank you so much for your consideration. And now here we have our contact information for our fabulous speakers. So if you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. And of course, the Project Unicorn email, projectunicorn@innovateedunyc.org. If you have any specific questions about interoperability, we would be happy to help. All right, Jonathan, anything else you want to add? I want to thank everybody for coming today, and to thank you for our fabulous EdTech Privacy Ninja speakers. We so appreciate your time today and your energy and your resources, and we're so grateful to all of you who care enough about student data privacy that you took time out of your very busy schedules to attend our webinar today. So thank you so very much, and we look forward to seeing you at a future Project Unicorn webinar. Thanks, everyone.